Welcome to episode 194 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today we're going to be finding out everything about Innsbruck in the Tirol region of Austria, plus looking at a genuine bucket list ski trip, heliskiing in Chile. Now, my name is Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. Firstly, for her first time on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Elena Protopopow from Tyrol. Hi, Elena. How are you?
Hi, Iain.
I'm very excited I managed to pronounce your name correctly. We had a little chat in the Blue Room about, how you came with a Russian name to Innsbruck, but we might discuss that a little bit later on. You are in Innsbruck right now. How's it looking outside?
It's perfect. I mean, we had a lot of snow over the last 2 weeks, so we're all happy, compared to last year where we had a lack of snow. This season and the opening of it was great.
Yeah, we love that. And what altitude is, we'll discuss Innsbruck in more detail, but what altitude is Innsbruck?
Oh, it's 562 meters.
Is there snow on the floor at the moment?
Yes, it's outside. I could show you outside in my garden. I do have a lot of snow. Yeah.
Okay, that is good. When the snow line's down to kind of 500 meters, then that is, very encouraging. Well, we'll talk about snow a little bit later. Secondly, we've got Lucy Aspden, ski editor at the Telegraph. Lucy's been on the show a number of times before. How are you, Lucy?
I'm very well, thank you, Iain. Very excited for the start of the season.
Whereabouts are you today?
I am at home up in Preston today.
Okay, has it been cold up there? Any chance of snow?
We were in the lakes last weekend. I don't know if you all saw in the news the big snow that hit the Lake District, and we were up there. So yes, it's been lovely and wintry. I was feeling a little left out for not being in the Alps with all this epic snow they've had. And then when it fell in the Lake District, I thought, someone is looking down on me. I was very lucky.
Sorry, did you take your skis up there then?
So we did, yes. I'll answer that question when you come to it.
Well, as you know, Lucy, I do like to ask people, around this point in the show when you last skied or snowboarded. So go on then. You were last skiing on skis in the UK.
Yep. The last time I was on a pair of skis was on Sunday morning on Lowrig Fell in the Lake District, about a mile outside of Ambleside. So when we saw the snow had fallen, we've never actually skied in the Lake District, which is a crime considering how close we are. We'd set out to go and ski on there. They do have a resort up there on the back of Helvellyn and Rays, but actually the snow stopped in the middle of the Lake District and they didn't get it that far up. So we stuck to the South Lakes and were brave. I strapped the skis to the back of my husband's backpack and we just thought, we'll just go see where we can slide. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't long, but I was sliding somewhere in the snow. It was great.
I love that. I mean, I do recall we've covered skiing in the Lake District on the podcast before. I think it was, I'll put a link in the show notes. I think it was Simon Burgess. And there is a webcam that you can check the whole time, can't you, to see what the status is? Because they run the lift there when there's enough snow. But you were, self-propelled when you were doing it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we were watching that webcam. It's like a live feed on Twitter and they have a really active Facebook group. And they keep updates in there. And we kind of drove towards that part of the lakes to see if we could see snow on the tops. And it was just obvious that there wasn't enough. So stuck to the South Lakes and thought, we'll just see what we can do. Took a pair of old battered skis because you're not wanting to take anything nice and fresh in those conditions. So
right. And what was the kind of biggest descent you got? We took like a couple of 100 meters or 20 meters?
Literally probably about 10 meters because it's like you're not designed for it round there. This is why I put a post on Instagram and I was like, this is not promoting skiing in the Lake District. It wasn't fun. Well, no, it was fun. It just wasn't pretty or long.
Right.
Well, it's just the novelty of it all, isn't it?
Great. Right, Eleanor, let me ask you then, same question. When did you last ski or snowboard?
So I'm a skier. And the last time was last year, actually. I couldn't make it. But yes, I'm really excited to ski the first time of this winter season, the upcoming weekend.
Right. You're going to be skiing this weekend, are you? Where will you go?
Probably Kuhtai. I mean, I'm not sure. So we do have, a lot of surrounding skiing areas, altogether 13 surrounding. My favorite, I would say, is, skiing area is Seefeld.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're going to discuss some of these ski areas around Innsbruck a little bit later on. I will be out in the Alps, I think in 9 days' time in Les Arcs now, going out on the inaugural Eurostar snow train. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I've been looking at the forecast and it seems that there's even more snow to coming in like on the back of this weekend coming up. But let's have a listen to a few snow reports. We've had some sent in. I've got Tim reporting in from the Dolomites from Inspired Italy, Andy Butterworth from St Anton, he's from Kaluma Travel, and Alex Armand from Tip Top Ski Coaching, normally in Ladies Out, but working out in Cervinia at the moment. She sent us a report from there.
Buongiorno, Ian. It's Tim from Inspired Italy here in the Val Gardena in the Dolomiti Superski area in northern Italy. Lou and I have been out skiing today in the Val Gardena, specifically on the Cerceda mountain above Ortisei and Santa Cristina, and it was absolutely wonderful. Little bit of sunshine, slopes are in immaculate condition, perfectly groomed, all the way down, good base, pretty packed, perfect carving conditions, and that is what we have been doing. Just went out for a couple of hours and it was really, really fantastic. So Dolomiti Superski are currently reporting 236 of the 450 lifts are currently active and open. And of the 1,200 plus kilometres of skiing available, 544 kilometres are currently open, but that's pretty much changing every day. Alpe di Susi, for argument's sake, is going to open tomorrow. But the big news is that the Sella Ronda opened today, clockwise and anti-clockwise, which is great news. That's always the central feature of the Dolomiti Superski area, except for the fact in a week's time we have the men's World Cup downhill on the Saslong, the Val Gardena downhill, and as you may have seen in the news, we're expecting an extra race there next week. So racing will start on the Thursday the 14th, and then the Val Gardena races true on the 15th and the 16th. Everybody getting super excited about that. We're excited because we're going to go, and hopefully we'll send you a report from there.
Hi Ian, hi everyone. Andy over in St Anton doing another epic weather report. I've been lucky enough in the last week to ski in both Courchevel 1850 and St Anton. I can tell you that Courchevel was good. Managed to ski on the second day of the lifts opening in blue skies, lovely powder, thigh deep in places, beautiful piece. It was quite busy for an opening weekend, which is a very good sign because some of the best snow, some of the best ski opening that Courchevel has had in many a year. That was good, but St Anton, Austria, was epic. It is epic. It's probably the best December snowfall, the most amount of snow in a December in 20 years. The locals are all talking about it. We're all talking about it. Everyone's excited by it, and we're really hoping it brings good omens for a snowy season ahead. Having skied a couple of lovely runs, it's fresh powder all the way. In the mornings, it's still quiet and beautiful and sunny, and you're probably looking at round about sort of the last 4 or 5 days have been shin deep on the piste in the morning. It's been really that good. Off the piste, up high, some places haven't opened yet. Why? Because there's too much snow. Can you have too much snow? Well, sometimes, yes, you can. This early in December, there's about 3 meters snow depth up at the very top, at the top of Schindler. It really is pretty epic. November, the end of November brought heavy snowfalls and some freezing rain, which really packed down the base up on the mountain. So it set the base mid to end of November really, really early, which was great for the snowfall to come. And December has just been dump after dump after dump. It's been knee deep in the mornings, digging your car out, going to work kind of deep. The ski opening weekend was epic. The first day was a little bit overcast and snowy. The second day was blue sky, powder day, an absolute bluebird banger. The slopes were busy with all the locals making the very most of the epic snow conditions. The forecast is good. It's due to stay cold, which is perfect for the snow. It's snowing as I speak now on the Wednesday evening, just before the podcast gets recorded. So there's probably going to be a good 10-15 centimetres on the floor when I wake up in the morning. Yeah, that's the kind of report as it is at the moment. Courchevel has been good, but St Anton has been epic. It is epic, and if the forecast rings true, and at least in the next week ahead, it's due to be a fantastic December of snow. If you haven't booked a holiday yet, I urge you to look at the webcams. Don't take my word for it. Take the snow god's word for it. Look at those webcams and book a holiday. The slopes are quiet. The conditions are absolutely perfect. You don't want to miss out. That's a snow forecast from St Anton. Wishing you all the best and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers!
Hi there, this is Alex Armand from Tip Top Ski Coaching. This time bringing you a snow report from Cervinia, where I am for a couple of weeks with non-stop snow before going back to Les Deux Alpes next week. So we've had heaps and heaps of snow last week, and we've had snow overnight and blue skies at the moment for this week, which is perfect. The pistes are in great condition. We're skiing all the way back down to the village. Fresh snow on the pistes in the morning, nicely groomed underneath. Hero snow, absolutely wonderful. Such a good start to the season.
Right, this seems like a good point to remind you, listener, that you can save money this winter when you book your ski hire at intersportrent.com and use the code SKIPODCAST. You get a guaranteed discount for all ski hire in France, Austria and Switzerland. And to make it even simpler, you don't even need to use that code. You can just take the link in the show notes and your basket will automatically be reduced. So if you want to support the Ski Podcast, please do remember to book your ski hire with Intersport and use the code SKIPODCAST at checkout, or take that link in the show notes. Now, I've got a few bits of news items. We've released a couple of episodes of the podcast since our last regular one, I suppose. Really interesting interview I did with Jamie Grant, the founder of Carv. That was episode 193. And then just released our first equipment special with Al Morgan, where we're looking at skis. So that hasn't been given an official number, but that's a good one to catch up with. Just out of interest, in terms of Carv, we were talking in that interview about the app, and the gamification side of things is great. I had a quick look to see what the top scores in the last week have been. It's 153 in France by someone called José Lopez, who is skiing in Val d'Isère. But in Austria, it's 161 by someone called Janus Hecht. So I don't know if that means you get better skiers in Austria or not, but it set me a target. I think my highest ever ski IQ is 152. So I'll try and get that when I'm in Les Arcs. Bit of Team GB news. Excellent news for Charlotte Banks and Huw Nightingale, who won the first team snowboard cross of the season, backing up their win at the World Championship last winter. You can actually have a listen to me chatting with Charlotte Banks about that win in episode 188. Kirsty Muir, she got a second in the Ski Big Air in Beijing at the same location. Mia Brooks came fourth in the snowboard equivalent. And in cross-country, Andrew Musgrave got a fifth out in Sweden. And if you'd like to listen to my interview with him, back 2 years ago now, I interviewed both Andrews, Andrew Young and Andrew Musgrave, and you can track that one down. I'll put a link in the show notes. And then also 19-year-old Matteo Ginason, who I must admit I'd never heard of before, picked up sixth in the Moguls World Cup season opener in Ruka. So that was an exceptionally good weekend for Team GB. And this weekend, we got Val d'Isère racing going on with Dave Riding and the rest of the slalom team. So we're watching out for that. Now, a big item of news that's happened in the last week or so is it's been announced that Vail Resorts are buying Crans-Montana. Probably, listener, you'll know of Vail Resorts. You'll certainly have heard of Vail. And they own a lot of resorts in the States. But about 3 years ago now, I would say, they bought Andermatt, or certainly a substantial stake in Andermatt in Switzerland. And now they bought Crans-Montana. And this is, very interesting to me. And I wondered, Lucy, if you have any thought on this, the direction and how it might change things for people who are going to Crans.
Yeah, I saw that news come through and thought it was actually really, it's a really interesting headline, and there's a lot to dive into with it, because when they did the Andermatt thing the other winter, it was around COVID, so we didn't really see much impact immediately, if that makes any sense. And I think the bigger interesting part of this is around the Americanization of the Alps and the impact these huge American companies are having on European resorts, and what it will mean for British skiers. Does it mean there will be big investment and the resort will improve? I was a little bit shocked that it was Crans-Montana, because as a resort on its own, it's done a lot of development in the past few years. Lots of new hotels, really expanding its appeal to skiers. So, I think it's a really interesting news story. It'll be interesting to see what they announce in terms of investment and development, what it means in terms of ownership of hotels, accommodation and restaurants, because in America, they'll own a lot of what is on the mountain. So it'd be interesting to see if that model comes back across to Europe and what it means for ski holidays.
I think I read that the deal, it clearly involves a lot of stakeholders. They have bought maybe 12 mountain restaurants and a bunch of properties, as well as a majority share in the lift company. And I think that part of it is part of that positioning of the Epic Pass, which is, one of these passes that covers a lot of resorts, because the other, probably largest one, the Icon Pass, has, for Americans, quite a lot of substantial skiing in Europe now. You can go to Zermatt and Chamonix and Dolomites, etc. And so I think that possibly, they're looking, being able to build more value into that. They haven't bought any Austrian resorts yet, Eleanor. Do you think that might be the next step for Vail Resorts? Can you imagine them buying up in Austria?
Could be, yeah.
Does it concern you at all, the idea of the Americans coming over here and buying up European resorts?
I mean, somehow, yes. I would say this is a whole process, right? So I'm not scared at the moment, but let's see what the future will bring. But yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that deal is going to go through until later in the season. So I don't think we're going to see anything immediately in terms of Crans-Montana, but we'll definitely be following that story, and I'll be listening out for any other potential acquisitions they might have. Right, Lucy, I'm going to move on to you, if that's okay. I wanted to have you on the show. You've been on, several times before, but during the autumn, I suppose, I noticed on Twitter that you'd just taken a trip out to Chile, which would definitely be a bucket list trip for anyone. It sounds fantastic. I saw a few photos. You haven't written about it yet for the Telegraph, so I like the idea that we're sort of getting an exclusive. Can I be scooping you on your own story?
Yeah, maybe. You might be.
But regardless, I just wondered, firstly, what were the logistics? How did you go about it? How did you get to where you were?
So the whole trip is organised and operated by a company called 11 Experiences, and they are an American-based setup. They have a property in the French Alps. They have a property in Iceland, and they're all based around remote locations. They are trying to promote and expand. They've expanded a lot in recent years, and we have covered their French property, and they came to me and said, how do you fancy heli-skiing in Chile?
I take it you spent quite a long time thinking about whether or not you might do that.
I was thinking, I don't know, it sounds boring. No, I was like, are you serious? Because as you say, Ian, it's a bucket list trip, and I really think it's appealing to the British skier. Whether they'll do it is beside the point. It's just a fascinating place to read about and a fascinating story to tell. So 11 helped a lot with the logistics. In terms of what those logistics involved, it's probably, I'm going to say, the furthest I've ever travelled. We went to Japan last winter, and I think that was me going the furthest, and I think this probably topped that. So logistically, I live up in the north. If I lived in London, it would have been a little bit shorter. Yes. So I flew down to Heathrow, and then it was Heathrow out to Santiago, overnight flight, direct. I think it was around 11 hours. I'm going to have to check that, but it's a long flight. And you land into Santiago as the sun comes up, and watching sunrise over the Andes Mountains out the plane window was absolutely incredible. I was like, okay, we've peaked, and I've not even landed yet. So then from Santiago, you take an internal flight south. So most of Chile's main ski resorts are based up in the northern part around Santiago. You can get to a lot of them from the city, but the 11 base is further south towards Argentina. So it was an internal flight, and I think that was about an hour and a half south to a place called Portimont. And from there, it was all a bit ambiguous. I wasn't sure. We knew we were being collected, and I just assumed that'd be in a car, like when you land in France and you get picked up on transfer. No, that was picked up in a tiny little charter plane. So about 10 seats in this plane, which then flew us across the coast and then into Patagonia for about 45 minutes to a tiny little airstrip called Palena. And then I thought, okay, we're finally going to get into a vehicle. I'm going to touch solid ground. And as we landed, one of the most dramatic air flights I've ever taken, just incredible. There's 2 helicopters waiting. So from there, the helicopters pick you up and take you about 3 minutes down to the lodge. So yeah, logistically complicated, but the journey in itself is just show-stopping.
So just to reiterate then, you got a flight to London, flight to South America, a flight along the coast, then another one, then a helicopter, and you end up in the lodge. Did you do all of that in one journey, in one go?
Yeah, in one sitting. So I think
how long did that take you?
I think it was over 24 hours or around 24 hours. I think I left Manchester. It was a 4 p.m., 3 p.m. flight, and Chile time, I was probably there at about 4 p.m. So working a bit of time difference, which the time difference actually isn't as bad as I expected it. It's quite manageable. There wasn't that jet lag thing that I was worried about. So yeah, it was a long time.
It was a long journey, but the payoff is, so at this point, you're at the lodge, which is somewhere near Palena, did you say?
Yeah.
So you're close to the Argentinian border. It's the south of Chile. That's Patagonia, right?
Yes. So we're deep in Patagonia at this point.
Yeah. And then this is the payoff. Then you get to do your heli-skiing, right?
Exactly. So you are then based, and this is part of the 11 mantra, is you are in a totally remote location and everything on your doorstep is untracked, untouched and uninhabited pretty much. Until we did a bit of hiking a bit later in the week, but until then we didn't see other people, other vehicles, other helicopters. You are there and that is your base to explore one of the most dramatically beautiful parts of the world I've ever seen.
And what kind of, I always like to kind of get a fix for altitude. So where were you staying and where did you kind of go up to? What kind of drops?
Okay, so I knew you'd ask me this one, Ian. So, and it's all in feet because it's an American setup, and I was on it with, I was the only British person. Their focus is the American audience. They're trying to reach out to the UK. So everything was in feet. And I was like, can we just translate that across to me? And my maths isn't that great. So the lodge itself, very simple question, is on the side of a river. So you're pretty much at sea level there, really quite low, right at the bottom. And the mountains, so the max elevation, according to their brochure, was 8,000 feet. So that's about 2,400. They're not huge. They're just vast and dramatic. Yeah, so the highest we were flying up to was there. And then the descents are around 700 meters long, like some of the on average, some were a bit longer, some were a bit shorter. So it's not, you're not going to like 4,000 meters. It's all quite manageable. The extremity comes with where you are and how remote it all is.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing then you're doing multiple drops per day. Is that how that was working? So you must have a guide as well. You're obviously out in, you said, like the middle of nowhere. So
100%. So the big thing for 11 is the guiding experience. They had a fantastic team of guides. First day, they did a really in-depth briefing. And each day there were 2 helicopters and 6 of us. So you'd have 3 in each helicopter, 3 guests and 2 guides. And the guides were led by a guy called Mike Barney. He's a Black Diamond athlete sponsored guide. They're all top of their game guides. They heli ski guide up in Alaska in winter and then go down to Chile to do it there in their winter. So they are with you every step of the way. And yeah, I think on day 2, we did 9 drops. And that was on a day when we got postponed by an hour because of weather, if we could call it weather. It was a bit of cloud, but you have to be really careful with where you're going if there's any weather fronts because, again, such a remote location. But yeah, 9 drops. I think when I put that on my Instagram, people were like, you're kidding me. Like, that's insane. But with such a small group and such a fast operation.
That is. I mean, I've talked to a few, heli ski people before. You don't often get that much in that period of time. And what was the snow like?
The snow was lovely. The snow was really, really lovely. So it was there. their spring. So the heli ski season operates down there between mid-September to the end of October. So it was that lovely spring snow, not overly deep, no ice, no, just lovely corn. Like, I was coming out of all these Americanisms throughout the week, the more time I spent with the crew. But yeah, it was really forgiving, quite soft in places. So there was a lot of avalanche conversation and avalanche safety conversations. But the guides there, they're pretty much tracking and mapping this area. It's their first season doing a heli ski setup down there. And they are, as they're in the helicopter, they've got their maps and they're looking at the aspects of the slope, the steepness of the slope, and they're writing all this down because ski maps don't exist for this part of the world. And that is what is totally unique. So yeah, it was really lovely snow and really forgiving for someone who, I was a bit worried it was going to be waist deep powder and I'd be completely out my depth, but I wasn't.
Right. I mean, it sounds great. And I think I'm right in saying that it wasn't just heli skiing that you did while you were there, because as a base at the lodge, you were able to do a bunch of other things as well.
Yeah, so the lodge is based, like I said, on a river. So one day we went stand-up paddleboarding on River Palena, which is, I was thinking, I've done stand-up paddleboarding on a very still lake in the Lake District in England. When you get onto a Patagonian river on a stand-up and you're in full dry suits and there's currents and it was incredible. It's like everything you do in that region is, if you've done it before, it's like that, but on steroids. It was just insane. We went hiking and I was like, I do a lot of walking. Just the waterfalls, everything around you is maxed out because it's completely untouched by anybody else. And then the top non-ski activity was we went whitewater rafting on the Fuda River, which I'm not a whitewater rafter. I hadn't really paid it much attention. I was going for the heli skiing. And then when we got there and the guides started talking about the Fuda River, you think, I might just Google this thing. It's one of the top whitewater rafting destinations on the planet. And it was incredible. Such an insane experience.
You can do this and you can do heli skiing on the same trip. That water, you said it is there. Let me just think about this. There's spring. So that water is being fed by snowmelt. So it must have been pretty cold, right?
Well, it would have been if, I'm there. I didn't fall in, but you're in full dry suits. And I'm used to wearing a wetsuit and everything over here. I've never worn the full insulated dry suit setup before. Perfectly warm. You wear like ski base layers underneath it for a bit of heat. And then, you feel really insulated and safe. And again, that's another thing that the 11 team do really well. They provide every single piece of equipment that you would need. Including all the avalanche safety equipment, which was an airbag, shovel, probe, because I was prepared to take all my own stuff. And they're like, no, we prefer if you wouldn't mind using our stuff because we know we've tested it. I could have took my own harness, but they gear you up with everything you could need. And I think that really helps with feeling safe and secure and knowing like you are in control, because heli skiing has a reputation for being quite a gnarly, daunting experience. And that was something that really crossed my mind. I think I said to a few people before we went, I just hope I'm good enough. I hope I can do this. And I think the biggest learning I took from the trip is when you have 2.3 million acres of terrain at your disposal and an incredible guide, they can pick a mountain, a slope, a gradient, snow conditions that are absolutely perfect for you. And none of it felt scary at all because it's so well controlled.
It's interesting what you're saying there about people's perceptions of heli skiing. I think for many people it was affected by that opening segment they had in BBC Ski Sunday for a few years, where you got like it's actually faked, having talked to Graham Bell about it, but jumping out of a helicopter. People think, to go heli ski, you got to jump out of a helicopter. It's not actually like that at all.
There's no jumping. It's all very take your time, get out safely. And the amount of people who, since I've come back, have gone, oh my, you were jumping out of helicopters last week. I was like, no, I wasn't. It was just like Ski Sunday. And I was like, that segment has done heliskiing no favours whatsoever. And also, it's not real.
Evidently, it's a trip of a lifetime. Now, you mentioned that maybe they're mainly looking at the US market or whatever. I mean, for the podcast, if you're listening to this right now, well, there's a 60% chance you're in the UK, but 40% of our listeners are all around the world, with around 20% of them in the States. So you were invited to go along. We need to kind of drop this in there. How much would this cost for the trip of a lifetime then?
Again, I knew you were going to ask this. So it's all in, I had a quick look at the brochure they sent to me. These were the prices for last season. So the lodge has 7 rooms and a full buyout. So that's taking the entire lodge, the heliski experience, the whole thing, fully catered, everything included. It's $31,000 a night. But that's divided across all the people, right? So I've done the maths on this. This is obviously a luxury experience, and it's a once in a lifetime bucket list experience. Like, there's no denying that. We're not trying to say that your average skier is this is in their realms at all. I wish it was. I really wish it was. But it works out at about $5,300, dollars a night, and that's $31,800 per person for a whole week. And you can take any length of it. In my job, I'm very lucky in the fact that I receive press releases, go on trips, which are aimed at the super rich. And when I compare that experience that I got for that price, even though it's an insane amount of money, nearly £32,000 for a week, when I compare that to some of the things I've seen elsewhere offered in the world, it would be a no-brainer. So if, listener, you are super rich and you have a spare however many thousands of dollars and you wanted a once-in-a-lifetime bucket list trip, I think I'd put that over a luxury chalet in the French Alps, for example, because you are getting a travel experience as well.
Yeah, well, I know that we have listeners on the podcast who've contacted me before who've taken big heli ski trips, for example, to Alaska and places like that. So probably not going to be for everyone, but for someone, what an amazing trip. And thanks for sharing that with us, Lucy. Really, really interesting. And, I don't know if I'll make it myself. I'd love to go to Patagonia, but we will see. Now, if it's all right with you, Lucy, I'm going to turn to Elena now, a little bit closer to home and perhaps more accessible for most people. You're based in Innsbruck, and Innsbruck is somewhere that I have been before. I was lucky enough to go to Innsbruck actually with my family a few years ago. We went at half term, actually, an affordable half-term trip. We were based in Kuhtai, but we had a good time looking around Innsbruck itself. And I wondered if you could just give us, Elena, an insight into the town Innsbruck.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, we always say Innsbruck is alpine and urban, and that's definitely true, because you can enjoy the mountains, but you can also enjoy the old town of Innsbruck, which is really beautiful with its many, many landmarks, such as the Golden Roof. You probably have seen it, Iain. Beautiful architecture. So we have 2 famous buildings by the popular Zaha Hadid, the British architecture. So on the one hand, that's the Hungerburgbahn cable car and the Bergisil ski jump station.
Okay, sorry. So this is the architect Zaha Hadid?
Yes.
So I definitely recall seeing those cable car stations and the funicular stations, I think. And they are, very modern. Anyone who's been to London recently and maybe tried some of the new Elizabeth line stations or maybe some of the stations on the Jubilee line. Very, very impressive, incredibly modern architecture. Worth going just to have a look at them. But those are around the town. You mentioned the ski jump. Tell me about that again. I haven't seen that one.
You haven't seen that? It's really popular. Probably you have seen it in on the TV, because each year we have the popular Four Hills tournament. So it's one of the 4 places of the Four Hills tournament, and there you can see crazy people jumping from the Bergisil Ski Jump, which is really, I would say, brave. Ski jumpers are crazy people, but it's just a great event. So Innsbruck, of course, it's an Olympic city, Winter Olympic city, and place for great events.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the ski jumping and that Four Hills event, which I think happens in early January. We've had Rob Rees report on that before, and he really captured the atmosphere that you get at those events. So you've got this mix with Innsbruck of the very modern, but also the very old. You mentioned the Golden Roof. I can't remember what its name is in German or Austrian. What's its proper name? There you go, that one. And the imperial side of things as well. And then very beautiful buildings, they're multicolored, aren't they? Remind me of sort of Amsterdam. The point of Innsbruck, I guess, is the access to the skiing. And you mentioned to me before, you ski in lots of different areas. You were going to, I think Seefeld was one of your favorite areas, but you've got skiing immediately above Innsbruck in Nordkette. That you would take the funicular designed by Zaha Hadid to get up there. That's very quick to get up to Nordkette.
Exactly, about 30 minutes. So you can wide jump into the Hungerbrookbahn, so the funicular from the Congress Innsbruck to Hungerbrook, and then you take the Nordkette cable car right to the top of Innsbruck, the Nordkette ski area. So it takes about, I would say, 25 to 30 minutes altogether, which is crazy.
Yeah, and that's about 2,500 meters up there altitude.
Exactly. So it's one of the highest ones. And I would say it's more for advanced and expert skiers. People who live in Innsbruck just love this ski area.
So if you're working in Innsbruck, can you just pop up there in your lunch hour? I guess maybe if you had an extended lunch hour and do a couple of runs.
Of course. So for example, my dad did that back in school. He always said, like, in the morning he went to school and then in the afternoon they went straight to the Nordkette. So this is what we do. Yeah.
I know you said it's advanced. I seem to remember there's like a run kind of down the front face to Innsbruck. Could you actually ski back down to Innsbruck? Is that feasible?
It could be, yeah. If you live near Hungerbrook, then yeah, it's definitely possible.
Okay, so when we were there, we went to Kuhtai. I think I'll probably cover this in another episode, but that was when the jump was still going on in Kuhtai, and that was brilliant fun being there and meeting all sorts of people like Bradley Wiggins and Jason Robinson, etc. But what was really great about that was it was a very short transfer for us from Innsbruck Airport, which itself is incredibly near to the town as well. But there are lots of different ski areas that are within easy reach of Innsbruck. You mentioned, Seefeld being one of them. I mentioned, Kuhtai. What would your favourites be? Where do you think you'll be this weekend?
Probably Seefeld, because the great thing is that, if you, for example, arrive with your family or with your friends, you have more choices than just skiing. Of course, you can also do some other activities, tobogganing, ice skating. It also has an Olympic center where you can do some, swimming, but it has also wellness area. So it's a great spot for the weekend. And it's easy to reach by the train or by car. Because
all of these destinations we're talking about are like sort of 20 minutes, 30 minutes from Innsbruck itself.
Exactly. So the Stuba Glacier is a 45 drive, I would say, from Innsbruck. Yeah.
Slightly longer, but at Stubai you've got the glacier as well. So you obviously the snow is brilliant at the moment, but you've kind of got guaranteed skiing, with that altitude there. Yeah,
it's also great because it has a great snow park, I would say. So if you're up for a little bit of fun, then it's a great choice.
Kuhtai, putting that in context, and it was brilliant for us. I think it was probably, 5-6 years ago. So my kids were probably about 10 or something like that. And, decent sized ski area. Off the memory, there might be like 40 kilometers a piece, something like that. So, not going to sustain advanced skiers for a long time. But for a family, it was absolutely perfect for us as well. I mentioned the airport. Famously, I think Rob Rees mentioned this in another podcast, but it's quite a sort of tricky one to fly into, isn't it? Isn't there some ruling that you have to, have a special pilot to be able to fly into there?
Yeah, exactly. You need a special license to land in Innsbruck. Yeah, but it's an experience, I would say. It's getting a little bit narrower in the end, so that's why it's hard for the pilots to land there. But it's an experience. And obviously we have a great tour launch at the airport where you have an epic view, you know, of the mountains. So it's a highlight.
And obviously you can travel if you wanted to by train as well. We had Hannah from the Austrian National Tourist Board on the podcast before talking about how she took the night jet down to Austria. For listeners, if you're not familiar with this, you can actually take Eurostar up to Amsterdam, which is still possible this winter. There's some issues to do with the station at Amsterdam closing, but it's not going to affect us this winter. And then take the night jet down from Amsterdam, and you can get off at Verbier and access the other Tyrolean resorts, or you can go all the way to Innsbruck as well. Have you ever tried that, Eleanor?
No, but I would love to, because I guess it's really comfortable. Also, if you book in a sleeper, I guess it's really comfortable. So altogether, I guess Hannah said it was, I guess, a 12-hour drive. So she started 7 p.m. in the evening in London, and then went to Amsterdam, and then Amsterdam, Innsbruck. And then she arrived in the morning, so it's so good.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I think Innsbruck is good as well as potentially like a short break. I've got a feeling, Lucy, I may have read an article about short breaks in the Telegraph, possibly this morning, where it picked out Innsbruck as being one of those good destinations.
Yeah, we did a roundup. An update yesterday of our best resorts to go to for a ski short break, and Innsbruck is in there. I've flown into Innsbruck before. I've never skied out of there, but every time I fly in, and I've caught the train, so I've had to go into the city a little bit further from the airport. I thought, this is so handy, especially for people who want a bit of mixture of culture, city life, and ski. So, yeah, that was definitely in there.
Yeah, well, for me, I would like to go back to Innsbruck again and ski Nordkette. When I was with my kids, you know, said we'd had that family trip to Kuhtai. We went up to Nordkette and, you know, looked at the views and, you know, went to one of the mountain restaurants there. But I was eyeing up all of those slopes that you're saying it's more for you know, advanced skiers. I was looking at those and thinking, yeah, that looks kind of interesting and incredibly scenic as well up there, with the view looking back over the town and the valley.
Yes, and I also have to mention sometimes in winter we also do have some events up there. For example, the Cloud9 event. So I think it's a great mix. You know, you have some sport, but also some good music, some good food, and I think the combination is just fabulous.
And I think I'm also right in saying that if you were staying in Innsbruck, there is like a specific lift ticket that you can buy that covers all of those different. It might be 13 different ski resorts in the area. So, you know, if you depending how you want to access it, you go by train or drive, etc., and then choose on the day which one you want to go to.
Exactly, it's the Ski Plus City Pass, so it's including all 13 ski areas, and also some more attractions and also public transport, which is really nice. So it started at 2 days for, I would say, €140.
Sorry, that includes public transport and going into some of the attractions such as the Imperial Palace and things like that as well.
Exactly, yes. So we have some more 23 offers from several attractions, so there's a lot included.
Well, I mean, that's excellent, and I'm delighted to hear that there's really good snow as well. So there you go. In today's episode, we've covered the absolute ultimate bucket list trip, and then something a little bit more prosaic. Think about like a weekend away. Innsbruck could be the choice for you. So hopefully, listener, you found that useful. Now we're just going to move to the close now. I enjoy all feedback about the show. I'd like to know what you think, especially about our features. So please do contact me on social at The Ski Podcast or by email theskipodcast@gmail.com. Have had a bit of feedback since the last show. In fact, getting so many comments coming in from listeners, I'm having trouble fitting them in. But Pode said, you do really innovative, interesting podcasts. Narbs, who's on the forum Snowhead, said, very interesting episode of the Ski Podcast. That was the one about Jamie Grant. Lane really enjoyed the episode 192 about the Dolomites. This is an email. Andrew Dollery said, wanted to compliment you on the recent episodes. They've been great. You're on fine form. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Andy A said, really enjoying your podcast over the last month. So looking forward to this winter season. And finally, I thought I'd finish off with this one from Tim Raglan, which was really a pleasure to receive. He said, as an avid listener to the Ski Podcast, I wanted to thank you for the work you do to put it all together. It was your podcast that gave me the push to work in Verbier last winter. And it was one of the best decisions of my life. So, Tim, I'm delighted to have brought you into the seasonal workers world. I did 6 of them, and I can tell you that, well, I guess if I hadn't have done them, I wouldn't be presenting this podcast now. So, really pleased to hear that. Right. If you like the podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. You can review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps listeners find us. You can subscribe so you never miss an episode. And you can book your ski hire with Intersport Rent using the code SKIPODCAST or taking the link in the show notes. There are now 195 episodes to catch up with. I had a look earlier, 136 were listened to in the last week. Our listens are up 30% year on year. So thank you if you've joined us. There is a lot to listen to in our back catalogue. Just go to theskipodcast.com, search around the tags and categories. You're bound to find something of interest to you. Now, you can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at the Ski Podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank Intersport for sponsoring the show and thank my guest today, Elena. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Ian, for having me.
Enjoy your skiing this weekend. And Lucy, thanks for joining us as well.
No, thank you for having me back, Ian. It's always a pleasure.
Remind me when you'll be next on snow?
I think next for me is Norway in January.
Okay, well, it's quite a big gap for you, unless there's any more snow in the Lake District in the interim. And finally, listener, thank you for joining us. And until next time, goodbye. I'm delighted to welcome Elena Protopopow.
Yes.